Imagine a soldier returning from an intense multi-day field exercise where they've been training with the most advanced technology in the world, only to walk back into a barracks with failing HVAC and visible mold. Right now, the Army faces a $6.5 billion maintenance backlog just to get housing up to basic standards. The human cost of that is clear. Last year, less than half of junior soldiers reported being satisfied with their barracks housing. These conditions create significant challenges for retention and readiness, not just for soldiers, but for the families of our armed forces as well. Well, what if we address this by treating infrastructure like software? As a great example of the Army Transformation Initiative in practice, ICON is redefining the way that we build. By moving past legacy processes and using robotic 3D printing to deliver permanent barracks in months, not years, ICON is proving how innovation from the startup ecosystem can help transform military infrastructure from the ground up. Welcome to IQT Explains, a series in the IQT podcast where we explore technology trends and their impact on national security to provide insights and unique perspectives. I'm your host, Samir Punyani, and today we're going to explore the automated arsenal and the future of robotic printing with ICON and IQT. Welcome to IQT Explains. We've got a couple of guests here, one in studio, my colleague Peter Park, but I want to first start with Bella Jones, who's joining us from ICON. Bella Jones leads public sector business development at ICON, where she works with the Department of War and other government partners to bring advanced construction technologies that are redefining how structures get built. Bella, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Samir. So excited to be here and wish I was in that studio with y'all, but calling in from Austin with a robot right behind me here. So excited to be here.
Oh, that's so cool. For the sequel, we'll have to go on site.
Yes. We'll bring y'all to Austin. We have robots and tacos. So
robots and tacos, forget it. Forget the podcast. Leave it right there. Robots and tacos. We're changing the title. Forget about automated arsenal 3D printing. Robots and tacos. I'm in. I've also got Peter Park on my side. He's a manager on our portfolio success team here at IQT. In a past life, Peter, I think you spent a lot of time at embassies, consulates, bases all over the world. You've seen them at their best, and sadly, you've seen them at their worst too. So we're going to dig into how your prior experience really resonated with working with ICON. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. Thanks for having me. Bella, great to have you on. It's been a long, wonderful road with ICON, so I'm really excited to talk about what we've been able to do together.
Love it. So Bella, for our listeners who might not be familiar, walk us through the actual process. How do you guys go from a digital design to a physical move-in ready building using your robots and hopefully your tacos for this large-scale 3D printing system? I've heard something about concrete toothpaste. Explain.
Absolutely. Just wanted to reiterate a thank you. And to Peter's point, IQT has been a part of ICON's journey, so it feels like a really timely and significant conversation today to be here. So when I zoom out and people often hear large-scale 3D printing, they hear robots, and they hear concrete, they often wonder, how does it come together? And the beauty of ICON was founded back in 2018 by 3 co-founders that were looking across really construction in general, but primarily residential housing. And they looked at the way we're building today, and they said there has to be a world that we can imagine that is just better housing, more creative, more innovative, faster, more affordable, and really supporting the humans and the families that were living within them. And so when they came together, the way that they founded, the best way to solve that problem was through robotic 3D printing at scale. And so what that's looked like over the course of time is we have developed robots. We have 2 primary robots that I can talk about, and they often get a lot of the glam because they are the coolest, I will say, to look at. But we are vertically integrated with 3 other parts of the company that allow us to actually deliver that full-scale construction that you mentioned, Samir. So like I mentioned, we have large-scale robotic 3D printers, and those are paired with a pretty advanced material set. So we think a lot about the materials we're using, ensuring that they're globally accessible, resilient, and durable, particularly for our enduring customers like the military that we work with. The third aspect is design, which is personally my favorite. Think about a world if we all didn't live in right angles. Think about how creative and really form factor could look like for kind of optimizing for the spaces we're building. And so that's the design component and the freedom of form that comes with 3D printing. And then the last aspect is what you mentioned, is that software component. It's kind of software, intelligent software and AI component to allow those systems to be vertically integrated and operate semi-autonomously to allow us to drive down that affordability of the houses and the buildings we're building. So that's the tech at a high level. I often joke around at Icon. I feel like I need a PhD in each of those kind of subsectors to really be an
Sure.
expert. And I'm surrounded by PhDs here at Icon. So it's never a dull moment when you're learning about sand robotic systems and then thinking about architecture design all within an hour. But it is one of the coolest jobs in the world. So we bring those together, like I mentioned, and over the past really 7 or 8 years, started in the residential submarket, really focused on thinking about how do we provide single family housing. That was the largest need in Central Texas and still is as we build today. And from that, pretty early on, the Army and really the DOW at large and NASA engaged us and said, hey, we have an infrastructure problem. Just like the residential and commercial markets, we need to house our troops and our families. And we also need to think about how we build globally around the world. And we help solve the backlog that Samir, you mentioned in your opening. And so
Absolutely.
that started a really effective conversation, a relationship that has now taken us here to 2026, where we have built for both the residential and public sectors, we like to call it, over 200 structures to date, to include the first ever 3D printed barracks for the Army and for the Texas Military Department, to a variety of different structures, from revetment structures to T-walls. But at a high level, it's been a really, really fun journey, and one that has showed us just the power of autonomy, robotics, and AI, and how they can bring together something really compelling that can change the art of the possible and change the art of the future for both housing and the military at large.
Bella, I love that you mentioned the T-walls, because just because we've got a mock-up right here. I think, Peter, you've got some time in hotspots where like you just see that ubiquitously around, and if there's a much smarter, faster way to manufacture those on site, it's a solution that really could provide a lot of cost savings to the government.
Yeah, yeah. Spent a lot of quality time with T-walls. Never seen a beautiful one. So
There it is.
Peter, there is a possibility for them to be beautiful and functional.
So you talked a lot about, you mentioned the affordable housing crisis and your fantastic growth in the private sector. Given the unique requirements of working with the government, Icon just signed a $62 million contract at Fort Bliss in Texas to build on your prior barracks development work there. How does the commercial side of the business really inform what is really a tough public sector market for folks to navigate sometimes?
Honestly, it is a very virtuous cycle, and one that I think is often underlooked, of getting to go and really work cross-functionally in the private and public sector. We often talk internally that the government, and particularly the different players that we've worked with, everyone from the Air Force to NASA to the Army, and a variety of different customers in between, are really hard customers, which is a really good thing.
Oh, yeah.
The Army has helped us set standards for additive construction that we couldn't have done without the partnership of understanding how to build to unified facility criteria, and what metrics that the military holds their buildings towards, or I really should say to, due to the importance of them housing the most important asset to the military, and particularly the Army, which is its people. And so there's been a level that I would say has permeated and impacted our whole business, because to work for a public sector customer, particularly like the DOW, it requires a standard and a threshold that can be hard to achieve, particularly when you're doing something for the very first time,
Oh,
like
yeah.
building large scale 3D printed structures that had never been done before. So I'll go back to my comment on the virtuous cycle. Something that I think is underlooked is, in our early days, like I mentioned, we started working with the DoD pretty early on at Icon, so 2019 or so. We started getting initial investment from different government customers to think about how we can investigate some of the harder problems of building. How do you use more localized materials to build in areas outside the continental US, to thinking about how do we make our a robotic printer maybe more modularized to fit in standard containers, different things
Sure.
like that. And it's that technology and that development that directly allows us to be applied on commercial sector projects, that then directly goes and informs how we then move at a production level for the government.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of virtuous cycle of getting to test and getting to help solve some of these harder problems, but then getting to actually deploy that in commercial areas. And I'll use this kind of for example of, before Icon got this larger contract that Samir mentioned to go out and build an additional 10 barracks to support the Army, and mission readiness out at Fort Bliss, we started by printing 3 prototype barracks. And it was the first barracks to ever be built to the military's building code, the Unified Facility Criteria. And right before we were about to do that, Icon in a commercial sector was building our largest project to date, 3D printing a 100-home community just outside of Austin while we were preparing to go out and deploy to West Texas to build these barracks. And the operational learnings and efficiencies of different things of how do you connect a door to a 3D printed wall to a window, to really just thinking about how we run our ops for efficiency and scale to effectively drive down that cost that was learned on that 100-home commercial project directly went into our success at Fort Bliss. And that cycle continues on as we continue to move into other areas like commercial sectors and continue to scale projects. And I think it's a really beneficial one that ultimately allows our technology to innovate at a faster rate and has the benefit of giving the best technology and the faster construction, the more affordable cost to the DOW at large, which is really important to Icon.
Where we sit at IQT to hear about the virtuous cycle between both a private and a public sector business and product development and the learnings that you get from one side of the business to bring to the other is a place that we would love to help kind of shepherd with our portfolio companies and with companies that we work with. So I'm going to go to Peter, kind of jumping off from there. You kind of talk through how that might have helped the Fort Bliss project and also the role that IQT plays in helping a company who hasn't maybe done as much public sector work kind of navigate that tough market.
Yeah. Thanks, Amir. So typically what IQT will do is we will work with a startup to adapt their technology to the needs of a government partner. And with Icon, it was kind of flipped on its head. We were working to help our government partners adapt to the way that Icon was doing things. Jason Ballard, CEO of Icon, I'm going to steal one of his quotes. He's fond of saying that, construction is one of these few industries where we really haven't changed the way that we do it in the last 150 years. And I don't think it's for lack of trying to innovate. It's just, construction is hard. It's expensive. It's complex. It's high risk. And changing that mindset of an entire industry that's used to just sort of saying, like, this is just the way it's done, is really, really tough. What we did with Icon is we were really interested in, and again, we're probably going to use this term a lot today, is like, what is the art of the possible? What were the characteristics and limits of the material and the process that Icon used? And I think we were incredibly lucky to have some very forward-leaning, creative, maybe slightly disruptive government partners that, were willing to lean in and show that it is, possible to build something faster, cheaper, stronger, more secure. Obviously, our government partners have a tremendous amount of restrictions.
Yeah.
You talked about the sort of the unique codes, but then, you move over to other national security partners and there are additional, hurdles that you have to cross. And so trying to show that there's a way to do this that, again, faster, better, cheaper, stronger, more secure, but also just like more aesthetically pleasing, more beautiful.
Yeah.
In the course of our nation's 250-year history, I don't think anybody's ever sort of, said the words, wow, what a beautiful skiff.
Yeah.
Right. But, maybe soon.
Yeah. I want to jump on that, Peter, because you mentioned Jason Ballard, who is Icon's CEO. And if you look him up, you can often hear at the public speeches or podcasts that he's given that architecture is really core to both his belief and really the mission of Icon at large. And he says this on the residential side, but our goal is to help try to solve the global housing crisis. And we believe we could do a lot of harm if we don't think about just building better. And when we mean better, we mean more resilient, more energy efficient, more cost effective, but we also just mean more beautiful. And that's been a fun intersection as I have worked on the public sector side to talk with different, government agencies and users to think about, hey, how do we not just build maybe the standard building that we've done in the past because we have it set, but thinking about how do we build better? Meaning, how do we build a more energy efficient building that you're going to own for the next 1,500 years? But also, how do we build a more durable and more beautiful building or office space or training and innovation center, and having that possibility with end users to think about really the art of possible, which is what Peter mentioned. And having that conversation coincide with this reality of, hey, it may not drive up cost and we may have the ability to put a unique facade or curve within the wall because a 3D printer doesn't know if it's printing a straight line or a curved line. And you can get really creative with that. That can invoke this sense of really beauty within a building that I hope helps with retention and recruitment and folks being drawn to get to work for the government and get to serve in that way.
To the narrative at the beginning that you just mentioned, it's a retention thing, right? So much of life goes through barracks. So much of life goes through installation life, through base life. So having a place that's a little bit more fun, looks a little bit different, still meets the function, but has a little bit of beauty to it or a little form is a nice differentiator for, okay, this isn't just the way it's always been, and it can be a little bit more fun that way. I like that.
Yeah.
So we talked a bunch about Barracks, a little bit about housing as well. But at the core, it's a 3D printing capability. Like you said, some of the robots are modularized. You can put it on a shipping crate and get it in a forward environment. And the broader kind of pull the thread in the broader national security context of building in difficult locations and contested logistics. How could Icon's 3D printing capability, particularly using locally sourced materials, which you kind of touched on briefly earlier, how could that change how, whether it's the Army or another national security partner, thinks about logistics, supply chain surety, that kind of thing?
Like I said, Icon was founded not to just try to do something better, but to really shift the paradigm of building. That's why it takes folks like IQT and strategic partners, particularly as we go into the public sector, to help us get to the end users and to understand the requirements and to understand what they dream about when we say shift the paradigm, to see if our capability can help meet those needs. Icon has had the pleasure of getting to work under R&D with the Army to think about how we use localized materials for critical areas around the world. And so the whole project and concept has been over the past, 5+ years that we've been closely working with different government entities. Logistics has been at the core of the conversation about going to critical areas around the world, particularly the Pacific. And so our R&D that we've done is thinking about how we use completely localized materials to develop print mixes, so really printable concrete solutions. So the concept would be you deploy a robotic printer to a critical area in the world, let's say the Pacific, and then you could use the local supply chain to be able to have printable mix designs that are ready to build kind of multi-purpose systems, whether that's a printer that's printing T-walls and then turns around and prints barracks or housing. You have a localized supply chain that ultimately ties to mission readiness and resiliency.
So Icon's work with the Army right now complements and builds on a little bit of the prior work that you helped shepherd with another one of our government partners, Peter. Would love to hear a little bit about how, and really from both of you, how that work maybe kind of shaped or informed Icon's work on the Fort Bliss project and other work with the Army, and also how kind of it demonstrates or illustrates IQT's role as helping identify and evaluate promising startups and helping them kind of navigate the tough public sector market that it is.
Navigating complexity is a lot of what we do here at IQT. I think what sets the relationship with IQT apart for a startup, and Bella, keep me honest here, is, we are in the business of, we say, being this trusted bridge between the venture capital community, the startup community, and our national security partners. But like in practice, what that means is just bringing together the humans behind the startup, Bella, with the end users in government. And when we say end users, we're talking about, the humans who are going to be responsible, or rather accountable, for bringing technology into their mission uses and being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And, for us, what we found is the most effective way of sort of navigating that complexity that you talk about is really to do it sort of in partnership, getting the right people in the room together and iterating. A work program, this term that we use at IQT to describe, the process by which we bring a startup and an end user together. It's really an iterative process. And it's, taking a commercial product and agreeing sort of together what those enhancements look like, so that hopefully down the road, it can be adopted and brought into a government system. But so much of that is just sort of building a relationship built on trust. IQT success looks like a direct relationship where we can kind of get ourselves out of the way and let the Icons of the world and the government partners sort of take what they've already built together and run with it. And that's, I don't know, Bella, what did that look like from your side?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We often joke, or at least on the public sector, you talk to 100 people and then 2 years later, it's a whole new 100 people. And you're like, am I talking to the right 100? But what Peter just alluded to is like exactly that, particularly from a small business. And when you have a small team and you're really focused on this conversation that we've talked a lot about of like the art of possible, getting to the right end user and having the conversation with them on, hey, we have this capability. You have these operational gaps or these needs. Is there a fit here? And if there's not, can there be a fit? And how can Icon from a private sector side think about developing the technology in a way that can help solve those solutions? So that art of the possible and the way that you're thinking about how this solution could provide a lot of benefit, particularly to humans behind your organization that are helping solve for national security and really supporting our country, have that capability in their hands today or in a year from now, not 5 to 10 years from now. And so that effective conversation and getting in the room and really hearing from the end user is pretty critical, particularly from a small business's side, to understand what are the actual operational requirements out there and how can our capability help solve for that today and then in the future. How do we meet those requirements in a meaningful way that ultimately meets our mission and the mission of the agency we're getting to partner or work with? And so I think that's been pretty critical for Icon's journey, and IQT has been a huge part of that. And I don't think that can be understated as much as Peter's line of getting the humans in the room to talk about the art of the possible, even if it's robotic solution in the end goal there.
So with all of that, you mentioned NASA, you mentioned some other DoW partners. We've talked locally sourced materials, supply chain. Where does the journey go from here?
Such a great question. I mentioned I often think I need a PhD in all these areas, and this is one of those moments where it feels like we're going fast, which is a really exciting point to be at. But I'll kind of zoom back and just say this at a high level. Icon functions, we often say we're a triple use technology. Dual use within the startup ecosystem and the government is something you probably hear often. We often say we're triple use due to having kind of an off-world team that's thinking about how do we go build infrastructure on the moon and eventually Mars, all the way down to thinking about how do we, go to more forward deployed locations around the world that we alluded to. And then in the middle, it's thinking about how do we solve the now of how do we build really terrestrially, as we say here, and think about building both housing needs, commercial needs, and then meeting the government's needs from barracks, military housing, and everything in between. We're at a really critical point where over the past 7 years, we've been really working with various government entities and private sector entities to say, hey, here's what this solution looks like, here's what it can do, and here's the art of the possible. And how do we get you to come along and really help us rethink what your needs are and how this technology, both from the actual physical construction aspect to the design to the software, could help solve some of the pain points that you feel and the friction that you feel in your day-to-day. And the beautiful part that we're at now is we've effectively done that at scale across kind of some of these sectors and are really at an opportunity of moving from prototype to production where we can say, hey, we've proven out this capability over the past 5 years. There's more R&D and more areas to explore, like I mentioned, but how do we really leverage the capability now to help solve some of the DoW and really US government entities' challenges, while also in parallel continuing to hear from our end users to help solve some of those more challenging problems that we talked about so that the capability we need in 5 years is ready when we need it, or the capability that we need in a year from now is not missed because we were still focused on the past. And so it's a really, really interesting nexus point, I would say, and a tipping point at Icon, and one that has really been supported by Icon formally standing up kind of a dedicated public sector team that we function under and really coming to the government and saying, hey, we've proven this and now we're ready to move to scale. And how do we help solve some of these issues and ensuring that we're investing in our technology so that the solution of tomorrow is ready and is really a competitive advantage that we need both for the government, but really for America at large.
I love it. Honestly, at the beginning, I was going to say we should add a hashtag, robotics and tacos, but I think hashtag prototype to production
Yes.
might be the more apropos one.
Fueled by tacos.
Fueled by tacos. That's like, if that's not on an Icon t-shirt for like a team building thing in a couple of months, it better be.
We always joke, though, it's funny. One of the benefits, particularly for our government entities that we work with, is robots don't need a snack or a sleep or a smoke break. And so they can ride 24/7. And so we'll leave out the tacos for them. We'll give them to the humans
For sure.
behind the program at large. So
I love it. Well, Bella, Peter, thanks so much. Any last words, Peter, before we sign off?
Bella, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you and your team, and I'm certain we'll be on a journey together because there's a lot that we can still do. So
You're going to get on the Moon project and the Mars project?
hey, we'll see.
Yeah.
thank y'all. Appreciate your time and appreciate you helping us navigate how we do something for the first time and rethinking the art of the possible for construction. So grateful for partners like IQT.
Thanks for listening to this episode of IQT Explains. If you're a founder or an innovator building technology that could reshape national security, visit IQT.org to explore our platforms and see how we help the startup ecosystem bridge the gap between commercial brilliance and government mission.